I'm delighted today to be talking to Erik Huerta. He's Rapporteur for unserved areas and rural communities for the Inter-American Telecommunications Commission. Erik, welcome. You do a lot of work with Indigenous communities. Could you tell me some of the issues you're dealing with those communities?
Well, Indigenous communities, as I told you, they have always present the last, some within the last in developing ICTs or rural telecommunication in their areas. So when we look to the statistics, they always have the lowest rate levels. No, for instance, in Mexico, we have communicated the 90%. So, but with indigenous communities that are the 10% of the populations, so we probably are communicating only the 4% of indigenous communities. So, as they live sometimes in isolated areas, telecommunications don't always get closest to where they are.
What are the attitudes of indigenous communities to ICTs? Do they see ICTs as possibly threatening their pristine culture, or are they embracing them as a way of communicating with each other and with the outside world?
In an interview, one of the wise men of these indigenous communities, I think it was in Peru, she said, we're not against technology, so we want to use technology in our favor. So they are really, they know that technology could be used for benefit their development aspirations, or could work even against their aspirations. So what they want is to manage technology, to use it for what they really for their own development, no? And establish which are the uses they're going to give to technology, which are, especially for instance, the content, no? What is the content that is going to be communicated? Of course, they want to have news and content from outside their communities, but they also want to give their part in that, to have a proper exchange on the content development and communications.
So it's very important that you respect indigenous political structures when you're dealing with indigenous communities.
Most of the time, indigenous peoples take the decisions in a collective manner, no? So even when you have the authority, and the authority could say yes, if the assembly doesn't approve the project won't be done. So certainly these type of things are something we have to know. Otherwise, when we as governments do an agreement within an indigenous communities, and we do not do it with the right body, maybe we won't be able to make it happen. Sometimes we tend to think in a project from our perspective, no? But we have never been in the indigenous communities. So we certainly need the input of indigenous peoples, just because they have the best knowledge of the reality in which we're going to act. So they could give us advice, even, well, they won't say this technology or use this, that, but they could say the characteristics that they will be needed in. So we'll probably say, well, we don't have electricity, or electricity varies a lot, or we want to develop this type of content. I mean, maybe we need the communications for information about how we can sell better our products in other places, or which is the prices. So they have a lot to say about their reality. And also they could help us a lot in the way they organize themselves to manage a project. So that's why telecommunications project within indigenous people, it's a work that has been done together with them.
Are indigenous communities becoming more media savvy, as it were, and able to communicate their ideas and culture to the outside world and get more respect?
Indigenous communities still have got a lot of values that some of us in our daily life have lost, and especially regarding the environment. So indigenous peoples in many of the areas have been living there without damaging the environment for many, many years in a sustainable way. And now that we are in the middle of an environmental crisis, we need to learn more proper ways of understanding the nature and behave in a proper manner with responsibility from that. And we can get a lot from that with indigenous people knowledge. So ICT, I mean, help us to give the place that indigenous peoples, or the role that indigenous people have to play in helping us in dealing with these new ways of understanding the environment and our life in the environment. No?